Greetings, this is Lynn Graff, founder of Storytelling for Entrepreneurs. Thank you for coming to this particular session, and I want to be talking today about storytelling for founders, startups, business owners, anybody who needs and owns a business and wants to leverage the power of story to launch and grow their business. I want to start out by telling you a little bit about my background, but I want to share a quick story, since story is my particular focus, about something that happened to me years ago that really implanted kind of the power of story. For a number of months, we were pitching investors about trying to raise some capital for our company, about $500,000 at the time. And we've been presenting for weeks, sometimes months on end, and we weren't getting any traction whatsoever. We got a lot of no's. We got a lot of people say, come back and see us later, or they're just not interested, or it wasn't a great fit. Just wasn't a really good positive experience. And we've been focused on our PowerPoint slides, on a presentation, on a pitch deck, on the executive summary, you name it. We've been working really hard for it. Then one of my friends at this period, we weren't doing very well at the particular time, said, hey, there's a conference down in San Antonio. I want you to come with us. It's just a leadership conference. It'll be a good way to spend a Saturday and just kind of get out of everything and go spend time in another city. So we drove down there. It's about an hour and a half away. And we get to this conference, and lo and behold, it was my best friend and my other friend that had invited me to this conference. And it turned out to be more of a spiritual, kind of a warm and fuzzy, feel-good type thing. And I was like, oh boy, I'm not sure if I really want to be here. But I was there. I decided to stay there and just kind of enjoy the conference for what it was. And there was about 100 people in the room. And I sat towards the back where my friends went up right up front. And I noticed there was this other guy sitting over there, and he kind of had the same look on his face as the way I felt inside. So I went over there and I talked to the guy, and we just started laughing because his wife or girlfriend had invited him under the same auspices that it was a leadership conference, and both of us were surprised it really wasn't. It was more of a spiritual retreat type thing. But either way, we had a good time. We chatted. And then during the breaks, we got to talk a little bit and got to know each other. Didn't talk much, but just kind of casual conversation. At the end of that afternoon, there happened to be a basketball game that we all wanted to go to. The San Antonio Spurs were playing it that night, and we all decided to share a cab together. And on that cab ride, which is about 7 or 8 minutes, we asked each other what each other had done. And I asked him first, and he asked me. And instead of just giving a pitch or just explaining what he did, I kind of told a quick story of how we had come up with this idea for the business, and we were really passionate about it, and where we saw the market opportunity and some of the people that were involved with them. So I basically told him a story about the business. And so when we got done, the cab ride ended. We dropped everybody else. He shakes my hand and says, yeah, it was really good in getting to know you. I think I might invest in your deal. And I'm like, what? And he just kind of walked away. And I thought he was kind of flippant because he knew I told him I was trying to raise some money. About a week later, I'm back in my home of Austin, Texas. He's comes into town. Remember, it's about 90 miles away. Drives up and it says, hey, I want to take you to dinner. Let's just go hang out. And I said, sure, no problem. We go to dinner. Small tech afterwards. He goes, I was serious. I want to invest in your company. And he writes out a $100,000 check right there on the table and slides it across to me. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened? I just raised $100,000 without pitching, without presenting. And it all stemmed from the fact that I had told him a story from a passionate place about why I was doing it, the market opportunity, and where I saw the potential. And it wasn't about pitching. It was about explaining to him why I was doing this. And in that moment, I really understood the power of story and everything that it can do. And for months, we couldn't raise any capital. And over a conference and a 10-minute cab ride, I raised $100,000. So with that, we're going to jump right into my background. Again, I'm Lynn Graff, founder of Storytelling for Entrepreneurs. This is something I've been doing for the last 15 years. Before, I had actually founded 8 companies to date, and I've raised over $10 million in the course of my startup career. I've had myself or my companies featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Fortune, Adweek, and about 7 or other prominent magazines here in the United States. I've filmed about 1,000 entrepreneurs over the last 15 years as a producer, and I've produced about 800 videos, television shows, documentaries, and a host of videos for corporations and other things. And while I was doing that, I decided I really wanted to dive into the art and science of entrepreneurial storytelling. So I've spent in the last 15 years about 20,000 hours really trying to understand how stories work, why they're so effective, break them down to the very essence of what makes them successful, and very specifically, I focus on founders and entrepreneurs and business owners from the most successful that I filmed. Because I filmed, this next slide I'll show you, these are some of the founders I filmed, probably about half of the top companies here in the United States. I filmed the founders of most of those companies. So it's been a great opportunity for me to really understand how stories work as it relates to the entrepreneur, which many of you are out there or aspire to be. One thing I've learned about story is that it really is kind of this Swiss Army knife of entrepreneurship. What I mean by that is that you can use your story for pretty much every aspect of the business, for raising capital from that example I just showed you, when you're doing pitches, when you're trying to get the press to write an article about you, they're looking for stories. So you really want to pitch them stories in the hopes that their readers are going to love your story. Getting sales, when you're trying to close a deal, whether that's a physical product or a virtual service as a software or some other type of technology, whatever it is, stories are ideal for selling, and any great salesperson is going to let you know that as well. They're also really good for closing partnership deals. I've closed partnership deals with Dell and Microsoft, even with CNBC, doing different things along those lines. Stories are great for articulating a vision and a path for where they want to partner with you. They're also really good for recruiting executives, board members, advisors, employees to come work for you. Because it's not so much that people are come working for you because you've got a great product. It's obvious because you have a great company, but the way you can explain the culture that you have is through a story. It's also really good for negotiating contracts and back to recruiting, building advisory boards. So one thing that I also love about stories is their flexibility. You can use a story for every stage of the business. When you have an idea and you're trying to convey that idea to others, once you have a product and you're trying to raise capital, as earlier mentioned, and you need money to help build that product or get that product to market, maybe you're in the company formulation stage and you want to bring people and resources around you. Or once you've got the company going, you've got the product going, and now you want to grow the company. That story or a derivation of that story is going to help you through every stage from the birth of the company all the way until you effectively sell the company, and even after that you can use it. Every employee and every person within the ecosystem of your startup can use stories. So you really want to make sure and have a great story and then have them be able to tell the same story in the same way you want it told. So every person, every touch point, what I call the stakeholders in your company, and that's you, the founder, that's your executives, that's your employees, that is your suppliers, your retail partners, anybody who's helping selling for you. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the press, you want them to tell your story for you. So any aspect, touch point of the business is where you want it to be. The great thing about a founding story, which is where most of my focus is that it's evergreen. When you have your founding story, you're going to be asked that for the life of your company. They're going to ask you, how did you found your company? When did you come up with that idea? And you're going to tell that story over and over and over. There's a woman I've met and filmed a few times. Her name is Jen Groover, and she came up with an idea for a purse. It's called the Butler bag, because you organize everything within this purse such that they really have a good understanding of how to organize and put things in your purse. What's interesting is that I asked her how many times she's told that story, because she went on to get a patent with that $1 million and eventually got a $10 million in her second year. And that went on a TV show we have here in the United States. It's actually a channel called QVC, where you actually show products that you've made or created, came up with. And I asked her how many times has she told that founding story that she came up with. And she said about 1,200 times in the first couple of years. So the story, your founding story, your origin story, is something you're going to use over and over and over for the life of your company and beyond. And it's going to resonate with any audience that you're going to want to share it with, from your family to your friends, to customers, to employees, to investors, to the press, everything we just talked about. A story is an ideal asset to share with them. What I want to share with you now is 3 of the fundamental reasons that stories work so well. And it has to do with your DNA, with number 2, your brain, how it interacts with the brain, and number 3, your heart. How does it impact the emotions, which is how we make decisions? So let's start out with the first one, was when I say it's in our DNA. And what I mean by that, storytelling truly permeates our DNA. In every culture on the planet, scientists have discovered evidence of story. It doesn't matter what culture you go to, story is part of each and every living culture on the planet. It was initially how we protected the clan, how you would warn people from danger, or where you would find shelter, also where you can find food, and eventually it became how we transferred knowledge. It is why we are the most advanced species on the planet, is because stories enable us to transfer knowledge from generation to generation before there was devices to actually capture that, such as writing and now technology. Second, and this is where it applies directly to you, is that you have been exposed to stories from the time you were born in the womb all the way through your growing up. What I mean by that is when you were born, when you were conceived and you're in your mother's womb, there's a good chance your mother or father or both read you stories. Once you were born, your parents are going to be reading you stories. Your grandparents, your babysitter, anyone that's taking care of you is going to be exposing you to stories. Once you get into the education system, that's another place where stories are prevalent across all of it, from preschool to kindergarten, from grade school to grad school. Stories permeate every aspect of the education system, especially here in the United States. I'm sure it's the same thing there in Russia, but stories are integral. I know Russians are great storytellers, so I know that that is a big part of how people learn. And that's what it comes down to, is how we process knowledge. Our brain has been specifically evolved into understanding and teaching and learning through stories. And then what do you do outside of school when you were growing up? You typically would entertain yourself by reading books, watching movies, watching television, even games now, video games, things along those lines. Our entire world outside of education is surrounded by stories. And even in business, there are so many analogies and metaphors, such as the Rocky movie, if you've ever heard, that's a really popular one here in the United States, or Facing Goliath, David versus Goliath, such a powerful metaphorical story about history, about the underdog taking on the big planet. So there's all kinds of stories that we use. The Trojan horse, another popular story from ancient Greek times that is used in education. That leads me to the second part. Because we're exposed to stories from the dawn of time, and you as an individual have been hearing stories, learning through stories, and you're always consuming stories, our brain has really evolved to understand, interpret, and learn through stories. And one interesting thing that has evolved through that, if I share with you a fact or figure, only 2 parts of the brain are going to be activated. But if I share with you a compelling story and you integrate those same facts in that story, you're going to activate 6 to 7 parts of the brain. So what that means is more parts of the brain are going to be activated, hence you are 6 times more likely to remember that story than if that fact or figure was shared to you on its own. So it's really critical to integrate those stories and your facts and pieces of information into your stories, because people are going to respond more to them. They're going to be more likely to remember it. And there's another interesting fact called the mirror effect. And there's a gentleman by the name of Uri Hassan. He is a neuroscientist, and he's got a lab on the East Coast here in the US where they actually study people in real time, the effects that happen to the brain. So this particular example I'll share with you, they've got someone that comes into a room and they've got an MFRI machine taped to their head. Basically what that does, it monitors the brain in real time. Then they also have the same machines that are attached to the audience that's going to be listening to the speaker. So what they do, so when the speaker comes in the room and then you have the people listening to the story, there is no correlation between how their brain sounds. In fact, you can't even tell that they're in the same place. But once the speaker starts telling the story and the people start listening to their story, this amazing thing, their brains start linking up. The wavelengths start matching. Everybody in the room looks like they're on the same wavelength, and that's called the mirror effect. And we've all experienced this. If you've ever been to a movie, an action movie or adrenaline flowing movie, and you feel yourself starting to get tense and you start to feel your blood start pumping. Or maybe you're at home and you're watching a sad movie and you might start tearing up or just feeling somber because of what's going on the screen. Or maybe you're reading a book and it's making you laugh and you start laughing because there's this funny part in the book. What's happening is called the mirror effect, because the storyteller's brain is mirroring to the person that's listening to the story. And it's its super powerful impact that it has on all of us. And that leads us to the most important reason that you tell stories in the first place when it comes to business, is because you're trying to reach them at the heart level. So what happens when all those parts of the brain that I just referenced get activated is that these series of chemicals get released. And there's three I'm going to bring to you which relate to exactly why stories are so powerful and why you want to use them whenever it comes along those lines. For instance, there's one chemical called cortisol. Cortisol is a chemical that is responsible for the adrenaline flowing. It's what gets our attention. So that's one that kept us alive, aware from danger as well as opportunities. So cortisol is about attention. The second chemical is called oxytocin. Oxytocin is what we call the love chemical or the feel-good chemical. This is the one that creates a connection. This chemical was devised when early man's times because it's what made us want to be part of the tribe. If you weren't part of the tribe and you were ostracized for whatever reason, you were by yourself, you would die. Hence, it was a survival mechanism that developed over time to keep us alive, and hence that's why you love to hug another person. That's why you want to be around other people. That is the connection chemical, oxytocin, doing its thing. And then there's the third chemical, which is dopamine. Dopamine is a chemical that makes us want more of something. This is a thing that's going to encourage us to want more. So when you tell a story, you want them to want more of what you want them to tell. You want them to hear more about your product, your company, whatever it is. So the first chemical is all about attention. The second one's all about connection. And the third one's all about reaction, getting them to want more of something. And that's exactly what you want your story to do. Number one, you want to get their attention. Two, you want to develop a connection with them. And three, you want to trigger a reaction in them such that they want more of whatever it is you're selling. They want to learn more, they want to invest, they want to buy, they want to write about you, whatever it is. Those three chemicals, there's a lot more, but those are the three primary ones I want you to think of, because that is why people react. And what this comes down to, at the end of the day, I've learned in 15 years of studying stories, storytelling, talking to entrepreneurs, and just being around some of the most successful people on the planet, is the reason you tell a story is that you want to evoke emotion in your audience, because emotion is what is going to influence our decisions. We all like to think we are analytical beings, but the science has proven again and again that we make decisions based on emotions, and then we tend to justify it with our analytical mind. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. It was based on a book I read and some studies I read by Dr. Antonio Damasio. He's a neuroscientist and a brain surgeon. He had this patient by the name of Elliot. Now, Elliot was a successful man in the community. He was a father of a couple kids, a really smart individual all the way around. He ended up having a health issue, so he went into the doctor and they told him to go see Dr. Damasio, and they discovered that he had a brain tumor. And this tumor was located in a part of his brain that was responsible for emotion. Luckily, they caught it in time. They were able to operate on him and remove the tumor, and they removed the parts of the brain that were responsible for emotion. Now, it was a successful operation for all intent and purposes. He could still function afterwards. In fact, he scored in the 97th percentile from an aptitude perspective. But with all that success, his life ended up falling apart. And the reason was he couldn't make decisions anymore. He couldn't decide where to go to lunch every day. He couldn't decide what color pen ink to use when he was signing things. He couldn't decide what to wear in the mornings. So when they removed emotion, that function of the brain that was responsible for emotion from the brain, he could no longer make decisions. And therein, and a number of studies ever since then have led scientists to understand that emotions are truly the driver of our decisions and how you want to influence someone. And I'll say it again, the number one reason that you share a story is that you're trying to reach them on an emotional level to get them to feel a certain way about you, your company, your product, your idea, whatever it is. Because when you have them when you have captured them and hooked them with an emotional aspect of them, then you have the power to influence, to persuade them. And that is the crux of all storytelling, reaching them on an emotional level. You made this connection, so hopefully they're going to do something to support you, buy from you, invest in you, whatever it is might be. And that has led me to what I'm doing today. I've got a video production company that I've been doing for the last 15 years where I film entrepreneurs. I've got the book Start With Story, where a lot of these concepts that I just covered are in this book. Feel free to take a look at that. You can buy that on Amazon. I'm not sure we don't have a Russian version, but we will eventually. And then what I do today is I specifically work on story development through coaching. I've got an online course. I do workshops, and I'll have other content coming out that does the same. But the principle of all those things is I'm helping entrepreneurs a story, how to tell their story, and things along those lines. So it's really important that you understand the format. I think one thing I want to share with you is one key tip that I've learned over the years being around successful entrepreneurs. And a lot of folks that are in the story space encourage you not to do this. Well, I'm going to go against the grain. I'm going to tell you exactly. I want you, when you want to leverage the power of story, I want you to get personal. I want you to tell them something that relates to you. And here's the reason why. Is when they're in the US, for instance, we have about 500,000 companies that are started every month. Just imagine if you're an investor looking at deals, you can't even fathom all that. So they all start looking the same. And it's really difficult to distinguish yourself from all the different technologies. Products look the same, services sound the same. Companies, you can't tell one from the other, even sometimes their names start sounding the same. But when you start telling them something personal about you, then you really start getting into elements of differentiation. The reason is 99.999% of each of us as humans, we have identical DNA. But in that 0.0001% of difference lies 3 million distinctions. So you are the only person on the planet that has your experience, that has your set of connections, and has the knowledge that you gained over the years that has made you just the right person to launch whatever product, whatever company, whatever idea you come up with. There's a reason you are here right now at this place, this time. And there's no one can copy that. Not one person on the planet has that exact set of distinctive characteristics that you have, has the knowledge that you do, has the connections that you do, and has a set of experiences that make you special and unique and have led you to create this company. So you want to leverage that as much as possible. And you want to relate that to your audiences whenever you're creating a particular idea, company, or thing. Now, there's one story I want to share with you that speaks to the power of story. I always believe that it's important that you understand how a great story can change everything. It has to do with the picture of the two guys here up on the screen. This is Bert and his brother, Bert Jacobs. They were working, one was a ski instructor, another one was working at a school as an educator in the United States, and they decided they want to start a t-shirt company. So their other brother had been selling vehicles, so they got this used van which they're sitting on top of. So they decided to travel up and down the coast, going from festivals, going to music concerts, going to universities and campuses, selling t-shirts. And they'd make kitschy, fun, kind of cool, different designs all along the way. But on one of the trips, and they didn't make much money, they had to work part-time as teachers just so they could pay the bills. And they did this for about 5 years, having a good time, but eventually they were trying to figure out what they were going to do with their life and were deciding whether they want to sell t-shirts or not. And one of their road trips they were making, it was probably a 3 or 4 hour trip. Bert and his brother were talking, and they came up, they reminded themselves about how when they were younger, when their family was going through some tough times, their father had been in an accident, he wasn't able to work, and he was the primary breadwinner in the company, and their mother was a stay-at-home mom, so they didn't have a lot of money. Their dad was frustrated, not in a good mood. To kind of lift the spirits of the kids, the mother would go around the table and ask each of them, tell me something good that happened to you today. And it was this level of an optimism and hope that it infused them as kids. And they always remembered that. They always tried to carry that with them. So on this road trip, they're thinking, instead of just making fun little sayings on this t-shirt, why don't we come up with a phrase or a saying or something that infuses optimism in the people that buy these shirts. So they went back to their apartment in Boston. They lived in Boston, Massachusetts at the time. They invited all their friends over to come help them come up with ideas. And they usually bought some beer, and they all drank beer, and they let people run the walls, kind of the ideas that they had for whatever t-shirt. So they told them the story about their mother, how they wanted this spirit of optimism. They wanted to build a brand around that idea. So everybody started writing on the walls. They started drawing characters. They started making little phrases, words. There was this one particular phrase. After everybody left, there was this one character and this phrase that was written on top of it. And the character was a stick figure with sunglasses, and he had a beret on top of him, and he was smiling. And the saying said, "This guy's got it figured out." Just 4 or 5 words, "This guy's got it figured out," and he was a smiling thing. So they loved that saying, they loved that character, so they decided to change it. And on the screen here is exactly what that drawing became. It's this stick figure, sunglasses, smiling wearing, beret wearing stick figure, and they changed that saying to "Life is good." They went on to sell more t-shirts in the first time they took their last, what was it, $75. They made 70 shirts, and they sold all of their shirts out within an hour. They sold more shirts in that hour than they did the entire month on a regular basis. And with that, they came up with the idea for Life is Good. Life is Good became a $100 million company that's available now in 30 countries and I believe 3,000 stores around the world. It just goes to show you that they were able to take the story of their mother's hope for an infusion of hope and optimism in a 3-word statement: "Life is good," with a beret wearing, sunglass wearing, smiling stick figure. And that story helped them build a $100 million company, because the previous 5 years before that, they're living in a van and not making any money. So I just want to leave that story with you of the power of story and how it can change everything. I really want to thank you guys for your time and being part of this online business storytelling conference. It's been a joy to share with you the power of story and how storytelling specifically for entrepreneurs can really help elevate your company, take you to the next level, and get you to where you want to go as you're building your companies. Thanks so much for your time, and I wish you the best of luck.